In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
After my fiancé defended me, his sister said that I was teaching him to be submissive and that I was making him abandon his blood at our engagement dinner, but when she came to our house months later demanding the return of some gifted knives because we ruined them with bad energy, I wasn't expecting what she would do at our wedding. All of this happened during my engagement dinner, and honestly, I still have trouble believing it. My fiancé Brody, 27, and I, Marge, 27, had been together for several years when this moment came, and everything was going well. His family had their quirks, but I never imagined the situation would become so disastrous. We were at a nice restaurant that my fiancé and I had chosen. Nothing overly fancy, but nice enough to feel special. Everyone seemed to be having a good time, or at least that's what I thought. There was some tension at the table, but I assumed it was the typical awkwardness that arises when mixing two families. His mother was attentive to everything, and his sister Poppy, 31, was behaving as always. She's one of those people who needs everything to revolve around her. I don't even know how to describe it well. If you tell her you got promoted, she'll find a way to mention that she turned down an impressive job offer because she's so altruistic, or something like that. That kind of person. Anyway, at one point during dinner, her sister stood up with a shrewd look and announced that she had a special surprise for everyone. I was already thinking, oh no, here we go, but I tried to keep my composure. She was holding a large poster, and as she began to unfold it, she proudly proclaimed that she had created a family tree. I remember feeling touched at first, thinking, wow, that's really a nice gesture, isn't it? I thought she was about to welcome me to the family in some symbolic and emotional way. She started pointing to all the branches, naming everyone as if she were reciting the lineage of a royal family. When she got to my fiancé, she simply stopped. Not a mention of me, nothing. My name wasn't there. She simply hadn't included me, as if I didn't exist. I was thinking, wait, maybe she just forgot. Maybe it was a simple mistake, right? So I tried to stay calm. But then she said, I didn't add you because, well, it's a bit soon to put you here. She said it in such a condescending tone that it made my blood boil. As if I were a passing girlfriend he had just started dating the week before, not someone about to marry her brother. My fiancé immediately stepped in. He wasn't going to allow it. He said something like, what are you talking about? She's going to be my wife. Of course she's already part of the family. I noticed he was really upset, which honestly made me feel a bit better. At least I wasn't the only one who saw how absurd the situation was. That's when her sister completely lost it. She started ranting about how I was turning her brother against the family and teaching him to be submissive, as if the fact that my fiancé would defend his future wife was some kind of mental manipulation on my part. Then she blurted out, loud enough for the whole table to hear, that I was making him abandon his blood. At that moment, I was sitting there completely stunned. I hadn't even said a word yet. I looked around the table and people were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, clearly not knowing what to do. His mother seemed very upset and I could tell she was about to intervene to defend her daughter. I was angry, but I knew that if I exploded it would only make things worse. So I took a deep breath and said, probably louder than I intended, it's not my fault I have a partner who actually cares about me and doesn't treat me like a maid. I swear you could have heard a pin drop. Her face went pale, and the truth is I wasn't even trying to be cruel. I was just being honest. Everyone at that table knew exactly what I was referring to. After I said that, she just went quiet, barely touching her food for the rest of the night. Her husband didn't even look up from his plate. Honestly, I felt a little bad, but just for a second. Later that night, my fiancé told me he was proud of me for standing up for myself. Apparently, his sister had been making strange comments about me for months, things he didn't even want to tell me about so as not to upset me. He told me that she had been saying that I wore the pants in the relationship and that he was losing his independence because, imagine, he helped with household chores and cared about my feelings. Imagine thinking that basic respect is some kind of weakness. Well, that's it. I just wanted to vent a little. Thanks for reading this. Update 1. A lot has happened since the engagement dinner disaster, and honestly, the situation has only gotten weirder. After that night, I didn't hear much from Poppy for a while. She kept her distance, which was honestly a relief. I thought she was embarrassed and keeping a low profile, which seemed fine to me, but apparently she had been brooding over her anger and, eventually, all that pent-up bitterness spilled over. Before I get into details, let me explain a bit more about Poppy and her husband, because, honestly, there's something more. Poppy's husband, Greg, 35, is one of those guys who think being a man means never doing anything that might be considered feminine. He acts as if picking up a dishcloth could somehow threaten his masculinity. He's the type of person who calls other men weak if they cook or clean, basic life skills. Meanwhile, Poppy practically exhausts herself trying to live up to his expectations. I'm talking full service. If Greg wants a drink, Poppy jumps to get it for him. If his plate is empty, she's already halfway to the kitchen to refill it. If he leaves his dirty socks in the middle of the floor, Poppy rushes to pick them up before he even notices, and the craziest thing is that she brags about this. She genuinely believes it's something to be proud of. She keeps talking about how Greg deserves to be treated like a king, because men work so hard and shouldn't have to worry about household chores. It doesn't matter that Greg's job isn't even particularly physically demanding. The man works in IT from home and spends half his day watching sports highlights between Zoom meetings. Meanwhile, Poppy runs around as if she had 3 jobs just to keep the house spotless, and Greg happy. And if anyone suggests that maybe Greg should help a little, she reacts as if you just insulted her entire existence. Anyway, after the engagement dinner incident, I kept my distance. I honestly didn't want to deal with her drama anymore. But a few weeks before my wedding, Poppy suddenly got in touch. She asked me to meet her for coffee, just the 2 of us. I thought maybe she was trying to make peace. We met at a small cafe, and I immediately noticed something wasn't right. She had that smug, almost pitying look on her face, as if she was about to share some great big sister wisdom with me. She began by saying, "I just wanted to talk because I know you're going through a difficult time." I was confused. I thought maybe she was referring to wedding stress or something, but she went straight into a strange speech about how I was spoiling her brother by expecting him to participate in things like cooking and cleaning. "He's going to resent you," she warned me, sipping her expensive latte as if she were giving me life-changing advice. Men need to feel respected, or they just shut down. I was genuinely stunned. My fiancé had never complained about any of this. In fact, he liked helping out. We worked as a team because that's what couples do. But Poppy continued. She told me that if I didn't let my man lead, my marriage was doomed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Apparently, the fact that I had opinions or expected mutual effort was a major red flag in her eyes. Then, and this is the part that really left me speechless, she said, Greg never has to ask for anything. I just know what he needs. She actually smiled as if that was some kind of achievement. I couldn't help myself. I asked her if Greg ever did anything for her. Did he ever cook for her, or surprise her with something thoughtful, or just treat her like a partner instead of a servant? Her face tensed, and she got that weird defensive look. "That's not his role," she snapped. "My husband has more important things to focus on than household chores." I was fed up. I told her clearly that her idea of marriage is different from mine, and that doesn't mean mine is wrong. I wasn't interested in hearing her tell me how my marriage was going to be ruined. After that, Poppy started talking to the rest of the family. Suddenly, rumors were circulating about how I was controlling my fiancé and pulling him away from his roots. It was ridiculous. As if I were some kind of evil mastermind just because I expected a basic level of respect in my relationship. After this, I left the cafe. I haven't told Brody anything about this meeting, and I'm not sure if I want to. Any suggestions? Update 2. I wasn't planning to write another update, but after what happened at my wedding, I feel like I have to. Looking back, I probably should have foreseen that Poppy was going to do something. After all the engagement dinner drama, the weird coffee talk, and her obsession with traditional marriage, I should have seen what happened coming. But honestly, I just hoped she would behave at least for one day. The wedding itself started wonderfully. The ceremony was perfect. The weather, the flowers, the whole atmosphere, everything seemed like it was out of a movie. I remember standing there with my husband, feeling like nothing could ruin the day. I was so naive. The first sign of trouble was when Poppy showed up wearing a dress that was basically white. Technically, it was cream-colored, but in photos, it looked totally white. It had lace details, fitted bodice, and that long, flowing skirt that honestly could have passed for a wedding dress at a smaller ceremony. When I saw her walk in, my heart sank. I remember one of my bridesmaids whispering, "Is she serious?" And I just stood there stunned. I tried to ignore it because, honestly, I didn't want to spend my wedding day thinking about Poppy's attention-seeking nonsense. I figured if I ignored her, she wouldn't get the reaction she clearly wanted, but of course, she didn't stop there. At the reception, things were going well. Dinner was being served, people were dancing, and everyone seemed happy. I was starting to relax, and then I noticed my mother seemed tense. I approached her, and that's when I heard Poppy's voice. Loud, smug, and too confident for someone who had already crossed the line once. "You didn't raise her well," Poppy was telling my mother. I froze. I still don't know what exactly provoked her, but apparently, Poppy had cornered my mother and started talking about how I was too direct and disrespectful to my husband. According to her, I was one of those women who think they're better than their man, and that was my mother's fault for not teaching me to respect my place. I'm not joking. She really said that. Now, my mother is one of the calmest people you'll ever meet, but she's also fiercely protective. From what I was told later, my mother had tried to ignore Poppy at first, but Poppy kept insisting. Apparently, she kept repeating over and over that my husband would leave me someday if I didn't learn my role as a wife. My mother finally snapped. I didn't hear it all, but I definitely heard her say, "Maybe if you worried less about my daughter's marriage and more about your own, your husband wouldn't treat you like a maid." Poppy lost control. She started screaming about how everyone was against her and how she was the only authentic woman in the family because she knew how to be a proper wife. By then, people were starting to notice, turning to look, and I could feel the tension spreading through the room. I was mortified. I mean, this was supposed to be our day, and there was Poppy, turning it into some kind of twisted lecture on gender roles. That's when Brody stepped in. He walked right up to Poppy and Greg, leaned in close, and said something I couldn't hear, but whatever it was, it made Greg's face turn red. Brody then calmly told them it was time to leave. Poppy refused. She kept ranting about how she wasn't finished talking, and that people needed to hear the truth, as if she were giving some TED Talk on submission or something. Meanwhile, Greg just stood there awkwardly, looking like he wanted the earth to swallow him up. Brody wasn't having it. He called over one of the venue staff and asked them to escort Poppy and Greg out. The staff were super professional about it, but you could feel the secondhand embarrassment radiating from everyone nearby. Poppy was still shouting as they escorted her out, yelling about how I was manipulating my husband and how my marriage was doomed. The moment they left, the whole room felt lighter. My mother came over and hugged me, apologizing for letting things escalate, but honestly, I was just glad Poppy was gone. The rest of the night was amazing. Once the drama was over, people went back to having fun, dancing, laughing, and just enjoying themselves. Poppy still insists she did nothing wrong. She's told anyone who will listen that my mother attacked her out of nowhere and that she was just trying to help. According to her, she was just giving advice, and apparently we were all too sensitive to handle her wisdom. I don't know what her problem is, whether she's jealous, insecure, or just obsessed with pushing this weird 1950s fantasy. But at this point, I've moved on. My husband and I are happy, and honestly, that's all that matters to me. Update 3. I can't believe I'm writing another update about Poppy, but here we are. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more ridiculous, she managed to surprise me again. So a few weeks after all the wedding disaster, I honestly thought Poppy was done. I figured she would silently sulk for a while, or just avoid us altogether. But no, she wasn't finished. One Saturday afternoon, Brody and I were just relaxing at home when, out of nowhere, someone knocked on the door. I opened it, and there was Poppy. Now I know I should have closed the door right then, but she caught me so off guard that I froze for a second. She had that weird fake smile plastered on her face, the kind that's supposed to look friendly but ends up being creepy. Before I could say anything, she got straight to the point. "I'm here to pick up the knives," she said, as if this was a completely normal phrase. I just blinked at her. "What knives?" She rolled her eyes as if I were being obtuse and said, "The knives, the monogram knives I gave you as a wedding present, I want them back." Now let me clarify. These weren't old family heirloom knives or anything special. They were nice, yes. A sleek black set with our initials engraved on the handles, but they were still just knives. Normal kitchen knives. We hadn't even used them yet because we already had a set we liked, and honestly, after the wedding drama, I wasn't exactly eager to use something Poppy had given us. I told her we still had the knives, but we hadn't touched them. "Well," she huffed, "I need them back. You don't deserve them after how you've treated me." I didn't feel like arguing, so I just got the box out and handed it to her. She opened the box and said we had already ruined them. In June, these knives were still in their original box, wrapped in plastic, untouched in one of our kitchen cabinets. I politely explained this at first, but she wasn't accepting it. "You've ruined them by putting bad energy on them," she told me. Yes. Apparently, my husband and I had cursed her precious knives with our disrespectful behavior. She also said that since we had ruined these knives, we needed to pay her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman was now demanding money for a gift she had voluntarily given us. I calmly asked her why she thought we should pay her for something we hadn't even used, and she snapped, "I spent good money on those, and you two don't deserve nice things after how you've treated me." I admit, I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was all so ridiculous that it seemed like a joke, but no. She was serious. She said we owed her the full price of the knives, plus extra, because now she couldn't re-gift them after we had contaminated them. At that point, Brody came to the door to see what was going on. When he realized the situation, he bluntly told her to leave. Poppy insisted that she wasn't going anywhere until we paid her what we owed her. I told her that if she didn't leave, we would call the police. "Oh, please," she scoffed, "you wouldn't dare." So I took my phone and started dialing, and that's when her attitude changed. She grabbed her purse, stomped off to her car, and yelled over her shoulder, "You're ungrateful brats, and you're going to regret this." We haven't seen her since then. I honestly still can't wrap my head around it. Who demands that their own gift be returned and tries to charge you for it? Over knives, of all things? Forgive me for venting, thank you. She was probably just looking for some excuse to confront us. She probably couldn't stand the fact that we had been ignoring her drama since the wedding. Either way, lesson learned, if Poppy gives you a gift, treat it like a cursed artifact. Lock it away and never speak of it again. Update 4. I really thought the whole situation with Poppy and her precious knives was over. I mean, after she showed up at our house demanding the return of her wedding gift and claiming we had ruined it with our bad energy, I thought she would calm down or just move on to obsessing over something else. After we told her to leave and threatened to call the police, we didn't hear from her for a few weeks. I was honestly relieved. I thought maybe she had finally realized how ridiculous she was being and had decided to move on. I should have known better. It started with her talking about the knives to other family members. At first, they were just small comments. I spent so much money on that gift and they couldn't even say thank you. Or, I tried to do something nice for them and they didn't appreciate it. Annoying, certainly, but nothing too dramatic. Then she started adding additional details. Suddenly, it wasn't just about the knives. Now she was telling people we had broken them or that we had refused to return them out of spite. She told Brody's aunt that I had yelled at her when she politely asked about the knives, and that we threatened her just for asking nicely. Basically, she twisted the entire situation to make it seem like she was the victim. We would find out from mutual friends and family that Poppy was still upset about the knife incident. She started mentioning it at every gathering, no matter what the conversation was. Someone could be talking about their job or their kids, and Poppy somehow managed to steer the topic back to how we had wronged her. One day, Brody's cousin mentioned to me that Poppy had been telling people we owed her hundreds of euros because we had destroyed her gift. That's when I knew things were getting out of control. The worst part was how relentless she was. Every time we ran into someone from my husband's side of the family, they would mention the knives. Some people thought it was hilarious, while others actually believed we had done something wrong. Even Brody's grandmother pulled me aside at one point and asked, "Honey, did you really throw away her gift?" It felt like we couldn't escape it, and then Poppy took things a step further. She started sending Brody long text messages full of reproaches, accusing him of being disrespectful and turning his back on his family. She claimed that I was controlling him and that he would never act this way if it weren't for me. According to her, I had brainwashed him into abandoning his roots, and when that didn't get a response, she started messaging me. Pages and pages of nonsense about how real families support each other and how I was selfish for not returning what rightfully belonged to her. She even tried to make us feel guilty by claiming she wasn't in a good financial situation and that we had put her in a tight spot by refusing to pay for the knives. Never mind the fact that Greg, her husband, has a well-paying job and they go on vacations like it's their hobby. In the end, we just started ignoring her completely. We thought that if we deprived her of attention, she would get bored and move on. But Poppy isn't the type of person who lets things go quietly. The last straw came when she cornered us at a family barbecue. Brody and I were chatting with some cousins when Poppy burst in with a red face, burning eyes, and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "You two owe me money and I'm not leaving until I get it." I was mortified. People were staring at us and I could feel the tension spreading. Brody calmly told her this wasn't the time or place, but she wouldn't give in. She just kept repeating that we owed her and how she was tired of being patient. At this point, it wasn't even about the knives. It was about her pride. She didn't care about looking ridiculous or embarrassing herself in front of half the family. She just needed to win, and that's when Brody and I realized that no matter what we said or did, Poppy wasn't going to stop. She was just going to keep dragging this issue, poisoning family gatherings, spreading lies, and exaggerating everything until she felt she had taught us a lesson. So we gave in. We paid her, not because we believed we owed her anything, but because it seemed like the only way to finally put all this behind us. I still think it's ridiculous that we had to pay her for a gift we never used. But honestly, the peace was worth it. The text messages have stopped. The weird comments at family gatherings have ended, and she has finally stopped tarnishing our names. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that sometimes people aren't looking for justice. They just want to feel like they've won, and honestly, letting her feel like she had won was much less exhausting than continuing to fight against her. Update 5. Hi everyone. I know it's been a few months since my last update, but here we are again. The latest disaster happened at my in-laws' 30th wedding anniversary party. Brody's parents organized a lovely dinner at a nice venue. It wasn't anything fancy, just a warm, intimate, and meaningful atmosphere. They wanted to gather the family, share some memories, and simply enjoy a quiet evening. But Poppy had other plans. From the moment she arrived, she was in one of her moods. She wasn't even subtle about it. She arrived late, made a big fuss about her entrance, and immediately started acting as if she were the guest of honor. During dinner, she kept talking loudly over others, adding irrelevant comments to conversations, and interrupting Brody's mother in the middle of her speech to tell some unrelated story about her friend's anniversary party, which according to her was much more elegant. She even had the nerve to complain about the food, muttering that the restaurant must be working on a tight budget. I kept my head down, determined to ignore her. I wasn't going to let her ruin this night, but then she came at me out of nowhere. Poppy decided to start ranting about the knives. Yes, the knives again? At an anniversary dinner, in front of Brody's parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, and basically everyone present, she unleashed an entire monologue about how some people don't know how to be grateful and it's sad when you try to do something good and people just take advantage. Everyone knew exactly who she was talking about, and the tension in the room was unbearable. I tried to keep calm, but then she said something I'll never forget. She looked directly at me, smugly smiled, and said, "I guess some people just weren't raised properly." I felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. My mother-in-law turned pale, and my father-in-law looked furious. Before I could even react, my mother-in-law, who is normally the calmest and sweetest person there is, stood up and said, "That's enough, Poppy." But Poppy wasn't finished. She turned to my mother-in-law and told her she was a bad mother. She claimed that my mother-in-law had spoiled Brody and let him become someone who betrays his own family. Then she bluntly said that Brody was weak and that I had turned him against everyone who really cared about him. Brody's father stood up and told Poppy to leave immediately. She tried to argue and started shouting about how she was just being honest and telling the truth. But Brody's father wasn't going to tolerate it. He walked straight out of the restaurant while she kept ranting about how we had ruined everything. When Brody's father returned, he looked heartbroken. He sat down, shook his head, and said, "She's not welcome back until she apologizes to all of us." Instead of apologizing, she opted for a scorched earth policy. She started telling everyone that Brody's parents had sided with strangers and betrayed their own blood. She claimed they had abandoned her over something insignificant, just because they were obsessed with appearances. She even went so far as to post a huge rant on Facebook, paragraphs and paragraphs about how family should always come first and how she was tired of being punished for telling the truth. It was embarrassing. Most people ignored it, but some of her friends started commenting things like, "You're so brave for standing up for yourself, and people can't handle honesty these days." When Brody's mother reached out to her and told her that all she needed to do was apologize, Poppy flatly refused. According to her, she was just defending herself and had nothing to apologize for. Now Brody's parents are standing firm in their decision. Poppy is not welcome at family events until she apologizes. Honestly, I'm not even angry anymore. I'm simply exhausted. Every time I think Poppy can't take things any further, she finds a new way to prove me wrong. At this point, I don't even care if she ever apologizes. I've accepted that Poppy is just like this. She's so obsessed with being right that she's willing to isolate herself from her own family before admitting she crossed the line. Even after all this, she still hasn't let go of the knife drama. Last I heard, she's still telling people we robbed her and disrespected her generosity. If she wants to spend her time sulking and acting like a victim, that's her choice. I've finally learned that there's no possible victory with Poppy. Either you let her feel she's above you, or you spend the rest of your life fighting battles she creates out of thin air. Honestly, I just feel relieved that for once I'm not the only one tired of her nonsense. I think this will be my last update for a while. I'll let you know if anything changes. Thanks for supporting me through all this drama.